Imagine waking up in the dead of night. You're just a regular worker trying to make a living, support your family, and then suddenly your front door is kicked in.
You're dragged right out of bed. They don't show you a warrant. They don't read you your rights. You're just forced onto a ship in the harbor to be deported.
Or, fast forward a few decades. Imagine being a highly successful Hollywood screenwriter. You're sitting on a sunny studio lot, writing your next script, and it suddenly dawns on you that your phone is tapped. Your entire career, everything you've built is over in an instant, all because a neighbor phoned in an anonymous tip.
It sounds exactly like the plot of a dystopian thriller, doesn't it? But it's not. This is actual American history.
Part 1. A nation paralyzed by fear. Part 2. The 1919 detective thriller. To really grasp the sheer terror of the first Red Scare, you have to look at the perfect storm of paranoia rising from the ashes of World War I. On a global scale, the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution in Russia sent a very real, very cold shiver through Western capitalism.
Oh, right, but it was the domestic spark that actually blew things wide open. In 1919 alone, over 3,600 labor strikes erupted across the U.S., and then radical anarchists started mailing literal bombs to the doorsteps of the American elite, including Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer.
So, how exactly did the federal government react to this? 10,000.
Wait, 10,000?
10,000 suspected radicals, immigrants, and labor activists rounded up by federal agents in what we now call the Palmer Raids. And the vast majority of them were arrested without any warrants whatsoever.
Just think about the sheer scale of that civil liberties violation. 10,000 people. It is staggering to think about how quickly due process just vanished.
This incredibly heavy-handed response was actually spearheaded by a brand new radical division within the Bureau of Investigation, and it was led by a young, fiercely ambitious J. Edgar Hoover. They summarily deported hundreds of foreign-born residents on a transport ship that the press dubbed the Soviet Ark. But here is the absolute craziest part of all of this. Attorney General Palmer publicly predicted a massive, violent communist uprising for May Day 1920. And nothing happened. It was a phantom threat, the panic fizzled out completely, but that dark blueprint for state-sponsored paranoia, that was officially drawn. Part 3. The Cold War Psychological Thriller. Now, if the first scare was a sudden, violent fever, the second Red Scare was something entirely different. It was a prolonged, deeply institutionalized witch hunt. Following World War II, the global landscape changed literally overnight.
Exactly, because in 1949, the Soviet Union detonates its first atomic bomb, years ahead of what anyone predicted. And right at the same time, Mao Zedong takes control of China. Americans were utterly terrified. They were asking themselves, how did we lose our global edge so fast? And opportunistic politicians stepped right up with a simple, terrifying answer: treason from within.
You can perfectly see how public anxiety was weaponized by looking at this vivid piece of Cold War propaganda. You've got Uncle Sam sitting precariously on a little boat, completely oblivious to this massive red iceberg of communism lurking right beneath the surface. And that iceberg is just dotted with the tombstones of fallen nations. It is a chilling visual. It perfectly captured the national mindset. The enemy wasn't just an army overseas anymore. It was your neighbor. It was lurking right beneath you. Part 4. Hollywood and the Blacklist. In 1947, the House Un-American Activities Committee, widely known as HUAC, turned their cameras squarely on Hollywood. They forcefully demanded to know if writers and directors were secretly inserting communist propaganda into everyday American films, which directly led to the famous Hollywood 10. These were brilliant creatives who flat out refused to answer the committee's questions, firmly citing their First Amendment rights. And the reality of what happened to them is terrifying. They weren't just ignored or fired, they were literally thrown in jail for contempt. Hundreds of artists had their lives and careers completely ruined, often based on absolutely nothing but anonymous, whispered rumors. Part 5. McCarthy's Reign of Terror. All of this tension reached an entirely new, explosive level in 1950. It felt like a massive plot twist. Enter a relatively little-known senator from Wisconsin named Joseph McCarthy. He catapulted himself to absolute stardom by waving a simple piece of paper during a speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, claiming he held a list of 205 known communists working right inside the State Department. His tactics were just completely ruthless. He targeted the government, the U.S. military, prominent intellectuals, and he did it all with wild, unsubstantiated allegations. If you dared to even question his methods, you were immediately labeled a communist sympathizer yourself. It was an era of absolute, undeniable political terror. But every thriller needs a climax, right? This one hit in 1954 during the Army McCarthy hearings, and the absolute most critical factor here was the medium, because it was broadcast live on television. Think about that. For the very first time, millions of Americans were sitting in their own living rooms, watching, completely unfiltered, as a sitting U.S. senator aggressively bullied and badgered military witnesses. The spell of fear finally broke during a tense confrontation with the Army's chief counsel, a man named Joseph Welch. After McCarthy relentlessly, cruelly attacked a young lawyer on Welch's staff, Welch looked directly at the senator and delivered a line that shattered the illusion forever. "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?" That moment was a profound national awakening. The American public finally saw the cruelty for exactly what it was. Part 6. Echoes of the Red Scares. When we step back and compare these two eras, you can see a truly terrifying evolution in how fear is managed. The first Red Scare was a violent, chaotic fever. Mass illegal arrests, rapid-fire deportations, directly targeting immigrants and outspoken anarchists. But by the time we hit the second Red Scare, the methods had deeply morphed. It became fully institutionalized. We're talking congressional hearings, extensive blacklists, mandatory loyalty oaths targeting federal employees and artists. The state moved away from physical removal and straight into widespread cultural censorship and deep psychological surveillance. And we absolutely cannot just look at the methods or the cold data here. Behind all of this grand political theater were thousands upon thousands of shattered human lives.
Exactly. We're talking about regular, everyday school teachers fired simply for refusing to sign a loyalty oath. Families permanently ripped apart by sudden, midnight deportations. Brilliant, creative minds pushed into total obscurity because of a single whispered rumor. The human cost of this paranoia was just staggering.
Which really leaves us with one incredibly haunting question at the end of all this. What happens when a society prioritizes absolute security and political conformity over its own fundamental civil rights?
The Red Scares show us that the answer is devastating. A society ends up destroying the very freedom it claims to be protecting. It is such a stark, urgent reminder of just how fragile our democratic principles really are, especially when fear takes the wheel. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.